Hello and welcome back to another episode of Game Brigade. And on this show, we do reviews, previews, playthroughs, and have conversations of your favorite board games. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Today on the show, I figured it would be a good idea to do a 2-for-1 when we're reviewing Parks and Parks Nightfall. It's the first time we've ever done a 2-for-1 on the channel. I thought it'd be a good time to take a look at both these games and see what we think here at Game Brigade. So stay tuned for that review. Okay, so again, I figured we'd be doing a review here of Parks. I just got this off Kickstarter maybe a month or so ago, and I've played it a few times. Had really good impressions of it. I figured it'd be a good time to do a review, especially since I just mentioned it in my gift guide. So I figured if people were still thinking about it or curious, maybe a review would be timely. We still have our giveaway going on for our second copy of Oathsworn. So if you're interested in that, all you have to do to subscribe or to be part of that is subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below with the specific hashtag. So we will have more information about that later on. So let's talk about Parks. I've been wanting to kind of change the format of the reviews, have it be more refined in terms of a point system between 1 and 10. So I plan on doing that. The idea, though, of course, is a 10 would be a perfect, absolute perfect game. 9s would be somewhere a nearly perfect game, something that is, going to be one of the best games I've ever played. 8s are very solid games. 7 are games that I enjoy. Going down the thing. So a 7 doesn't mean necessarily it's bad. Even 6 or 5 necessarily aren't bad. 5s are where you're kind of getting to the so-so games. So that's kind of the review structure. Everyone knows the rules now. So let's go ahead and continue. So generally with what we do in our reviews, though, is I do talk about the play, how the game plays. I don't do a full teach, but just to give you an idea of how the game works, and then we can talk about my final thoughts. So Parks is a game where each player is going to have their 2 hiker meeples. This can be played up to 5 players. And the players are going to be traveling across these boards, collecting resources or taking actions to eventually purchase parks to get points, which are located here in the bottom corner, or having these cards which have bonus items for them, bonus goals for you to reach. There's a lot of different components involved in Parks, and Nightfall adds a specific layer to that. So we're going to cover the mechanics of Parks, and then we're going to cover what Nightfall adds to Parks in the second section. So the way Parks works, is the first player, who is signified by this token, will be the first player to go. You will take your first meeple and you send it to a section. You'll notice that some of these sections have wooden meeples on it, some of them don't. The wooden meeples are the weather that is currently influencing the season. We'll play a total of 4 seasons before the end of the game. The seasons are dictated by these cards, and when we finish, when all the people reach the end of the trailhead, the season will change. So the season will dictate currently what happens in terms of any state-based effects, as well as what meeples are placed out when. So these are considered weather, and basically each section of the trailhead is being affected by different pieces of weather. So when you send your meeple to a spot here, you will then take the actions available at the bottom of the tile. So this one would be for 2 sun. So I would take these, and these are basically resources that I can then spend later. The next player would go, and they can go to my same spot if they chose to, but there are rules regarding that, or they would move along the trailhead and go to the next section. If they are the first player to reach a token with a weather piece, they can choose to take that into their inventory, or actually that's what that is. And then they can choose on this one. So this one says you can do parks or purchase gear. So you'll choose one of those 2 actions. Purchasing parks would be choosing one of these parks up here. You can also choose to reserve a park. To reserve a park, you would just take it. You're not actually purchasing it, but you're placing it to the side, indicating that later in the game, you may want to purchase that park. Given, currently you might not have the resources to buy this. And depending on your bonus goals, maybe it says buy parks that have sun icons in them. And so you'll want to nail this park for whatever reason. So that's that one mechanic. Basically, this play will continue on and on until everyone has gone to the end. Special rulings would be the stopping on the same tile as another player. You're only allowed to do that once per round until one person reaches the trailhead. And by doing that, you have your fire and then you extinguish it, which means you no longer have access to land another player. This fire comes available though once you have one of your hikers reach the end section. This would become available again, so you can potentially stop on the same trailhead as someone else up to 2 times. There is another specific rule that if you are the last hiker, if all the other meeples have reached the end and you are by yourself, your next action has to come to the end because you have to get on the tour bus. We have to move on. There's more things to see. We can't stay here, people. So that's the basic rundown in terms of how this game plays. In terms of special rules, we do have the camera here. The camera allows us to take photos of scenic sites, and there are spots that we can take photos. This one allows us to take a photo for 2 resources. The camera reduces that by 2, and then by taking this action, you then gain control of the camera. The person who controls the camera when everyone is at the end of the season can also take another picture for 1. So it allows you to take more pictures, and those pictures are worth 1 point at the end of the game. On top of that, when you all finish, you'll have the option to buy in gear. These are located here in the middle. The gear allows you to reduce the cost of purchasing parks, potentially increases your canteen resources, or gives you additional benefits in other ways. So choosing on how do you want to spend your resources. Do you want to spend early buying gear? Do I want to invest in just getting parks because they're worth points? It's all up to you. The last thing we didn't touch here into the terms of the base game are the canteens. These are your water canteens. Whenever you collect a water token, either be through weather or through the bottom action, you can choose to put that water in your canteen and take whatever resource is on the bottom. And for us, we actually have the season of waves, which says when you gain water when you get a canteen. So when you get your canteen, you automatically will get water with it. So it's kind of a bonus there if you want to try to focus on getting canteens for this round. And then the final thing we have these wooden meeples, and these wooden meeples are wild resources. They can be used in place of any of the 4 available resources. So this is Parks. This play will continue for 4 rounds, and at the end of the 4 rounds, we'll all check our bonus score and then check to see who has the most points by adding up the total number here in the left corner. But what does Parks Nightfall do? Nightfall adds these little wooden tents, adds more of these endgame scores because they become more important, adds these camping locations, adds even more parks to the park repertoire. In fact, it added the ones that were not included. So there was every national park in the United States now is represented in this game. The original parks did not have a full representation of every national park. With Nightfall, you now have that. The final thing it also added was in the parks, you now have a lightning bolt action on some of them, which means that when you purchase this, you also take whatever the lightning bolt action dictates. So you can do 2 things for 1. So for buying Grand Teton National Park, I can buy this, and then the lightning bolt says I can do the park action again, which means I can then buy another park or reserve a park. So these allow for more play, more strategic actions to be involved in that. The tents here are interesting. So if I send a meeple to the campsite, the first thing is I have to decide, am I going to camp or am I going to take the bottom action? If I take the bottom action, we would then take any of the weather tokens on there and play as normal. But if we choose to camp, we do not take the weather action because the tent is protecting us from the weather. So obviously we're not being influenced by that weather. And then we would take this little tent and we move it over here to the side where there are currently 3 different campsites that we can enjoy. Each campsite will give us an immediate effect. So for this one, we can trade in water for wild resources up to 3 times. This one lets me trade in a mountain resource for up to 5 suns. And this one lets us shift our gear and or final bonus cards for additional ones. You can kind of cycle them through. So to choose on where we're going to go, we just place our meeple on a location, and then we take those specific actions. The interesting thing is that these campsites are double-sided, and depending on the year we're in, so currently we're in year 1, but when we enter year 2, in the bottom left corner, it'll tell you what year these are. So these ones now will have to flip. So that's years 2 and 4, 2 and 4, and 2 and 4. And so now we have new campsites. And so these will stay, and then we check again at the end of each season what round we're in, and then flip them back. So these will continually keep changing each season. And then when another camper now wants to go to a campsite, they have to choose from the available 2 sections because this campsite is already being used. At higher player counts, there are more campsites to use. One of them is very, very powerful. It allows you to reignite your campsite, which would give you potentially 3 campsites to use in a single round. Other than that, it gives you the ability to have more of these bonus cards than normal. In the base game, you're only allowed to have 1 bonus card. In Nightfall, you can have multiple bonus cards, which can change up the scoring or change up the strategy involved in the game. So this is basic rundown of Nightfall and Parks. I hope this was understanding and clearly spoken for you. So let's break it down. What are my thoughts about Parks? And we'll do Parks and then Nightfall, and then we'll kind of talk about it overall. In terms of the theme of Parks, I think it plays very well into giving you that aspect of you're taking a hike, you're seeing some beautiful art, but I would say that I didn't feel engrossed into the world of Parks. It doesn't necessarily make me feel like a hiker. So I would say that while the art is beautiful and interesting, and they've done a really good job of building a nice space here, especially with the different aesthetic art here, the theme doesn't grasp me. It could literally be anything. I mean, this could be cakes and pizzas, and I got to buy specific cakes and pizzas, and these are pizza shops that I'm visiting. It literally could be anything. So the theme didn't really pull me in as much, but the art on each individual Parks card is primo, top notch. Everything about the aesthetic is nice, and the meeples are very well done. Everything is wooden, very well done, very high quality, good tactile feel. So in terms of deluxeified components, right out of the box, you're getting very high-end stuff. I also like the screen-printed meeples. I always enjoy meeples in general. I think meeples are a really good texture touch. And whenever you have a screen-printed meeples, they give you that additional look for them. I think it's very, very good, very nice. I do appreciate that they have taken things like the camera to add more point scoring options into the game, to see, you're taking photos, you're staying longer at each spot. I think there is a little touches here and there to really bring in the theme aspect to it. But again, I wasn't pulled in directly into the atmosphere of this game. It didn't really necessarily hook me in a way that other games can. The most important thing that I like to talk about when discussing a board game in general, for me at least, are decisions and the quality of decisions being made throughout the game. So when we added Nightfall to the game, I felt like the decision implementation that comes up is very important. In fact, to give you an easy analogy of what the decision process felt like to me, it was very akin to chess. Chess has a very static board in the sense that the rules and the movements can only be done in a certain way, but there's still plenty of different options in terms of how you want to play the game or how you want to move each piece. And that's how I felt when I was playing this game. While we have a very limited board size in terms of where we can go, each decision point matters in terms of what is your accomplished goal. How do we want to maximize our campfire? How do we want to maximize tents? And how do we want to be the first one to stay as long as we can to get as much enjoyment out of our park, but also get to the end, because there are bonuses for being the first person to reach each section. So there was a lot of strategic depth. And I found that depending on the player group you're at, you have a baseline top level where people are just playing and everyone's enjoying and there's not a lot of thought going into it. But if you have a heavier group, if you have a group that likes to play things at a more of a maximum level, like efficiency level, I can see that Parks can reach those points in terms of complicated board states where you're trying to figure out the best way to make your moves. In fact, there was times, and I usually take my turns very fast in most board games I play, but I would sit here for maybe a minute or two thinking about what would be the best play and how do I want to do this. Haven't really experienced that lately in a game like this, which I would consider a gateway game. So it was very refreshing to have that. Although I do think that without the Nightfall expansion, it does somewhat limit that experience a bit. I do think the Nightfall, be giving the tents, the additional bonuses, and the lightning bolt Parks gives more play in terms of what is the strategic element to it. So overall, if I was to rate this game right now, Parks, I would give it a 7.1. I think it's a great game on its own. It's one that I would love to have in my collection. I would love to bring this out for new players to join in and play with us. But I don't necessarily think I would pull this out individually on its own to play at a board game night with my group. It's just a little bit too light for me in terms of what I would want out of it, but I definitely can enjoy it. Nightfall, I would give that a 7.7. I think Nightfall is a very good additional copy to Parks. I think it adds that strategic level to the game. It makes Parks a little bit more elevated to me, where I could enjoy bringing this out at a board game night almost as a palate cleanser, although the gameplay length is a little longer because it does play between 40 and 70 minutes. So I definitely could see it not quite a palate cleanser, but almost as like an introductory game or an after game session. So that's the review. 7.1, 7.7. You heard it here. Let me know what you guys think. I love to get some more comments on it. In terms of the hashtag for this video, why don't you leave a hashtag down there, hashtag Parks, and let me guys know what you think of this review. Tell me what you think of the new style. I'm going to be updating the Discord. I'll figure out a way to update the Discord to have my official reviews scores labeled somewhere. I think that'd be kind of fun, so that way you can actually see what I reviewed specific games with the new rating scale. Man, I can learn to speak. That would be great. So that's about it. I appreciate everyone who stayed till the end of the review. I will talk to you all very soon.